My name is Zariah, and the day my family finally lost me began with the sound of my 8-week-old baby crying from the back seat of a wrecked car. That afternoon in Atlanta should have been ordinary. I had taken my son Malik to a routine pediatric appointment, listened to the doctor tell me he was healthy, and driven home with the kind of peace I had spent my whole life chasing. Malik was asleep behind me, wrapped in a soft blue blanket, his tiny mouth moving like he was dreaming of milk. I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, smiling every time his little fingers twitched. For once, I was not thinking about my parents, not thinking about my sister Nia, not thinking about how hard I had worked to earn love from people who always made me feel like a guest in my own family. I was only thinking about getting my baby home safely before the storm clouds above Peachtree Street finally opened. The light ahead turned red, and I stopped at the intersection. Rain dotted the windshield. Cars moved around me in slow, impatient lines. Malik made a small sound in his sleep, and I whispered, "It is okay, baby. We are almost home." Then the light turned green. I eased my foot onto the gas pedal and entered the intersection. I never saw the silver SUV until it was too late. It came from my left, speeding through the red light with no brake lights, no warning, no mercy. The crash was not a sound. It was an explosion. Metal folded around me. Glass burst across my face. My body slammed sideways, then forward, then back again as the car spun across the wet pavement. The airbag struck my chest so hard that for a few seconds I could not breathe at all. Everything became white, then red, then strangely silent. When the car finally stopped moving, I was pinned against the steering wheel, tasting blood and dust. My left leg was trapped beneath the crushed dashboard, bent at an angle that made my stomach turn before the pain even reached my brain. Then it hit me, sharp and blinding, tearing a scream out of my throat. But the scream died the moment I remembered Malik. I tried to twist around, but fire shot through my ribs and down my leg. I could not see him. I could not reach him. My hands shook against the broken steering wheel as I forced air into my lungs. "Malik," I gasped. "Baby, please cry. Please let me hear you." For one terrifying second, there was nothing but rain tapping against shattered glass. Then his cry cut through the wreckage, thin, furious, and alive. I broke down right there, trapped in the driver's seat. Not from the pain, but from relief so powerful it almost pulled me under. People were shouting outside the car. Someone yelled that there was a baby in the back. Someone else told me not to move. Sirens wailed closer and closer until red and blue lights flashed across the broken windshield. A paramedic leaned through the twisted frame near my window and said, "Ma'am, stay with me. What is your name?" I tried to answer, but my mouth was full of blood. "Zariah," I finally whispered. "My son. Please check my son." Another responder opened the rear door with heavy tools and reached for Malik's car seat. I heard buckles snapping, equipment clanking, voices moving fast. Then a woman called out, "The baby is conscious. He has a few scratches, but he is alert." The car seat protected him. I closed my eyes and thanked God with whatever strength I had left. They worked around me carefully, cutting through the crushed door, supporting my neck, warning me before every movement. When they freed my leg, the pain was so violent that the sky seemed to disappear. I heard one of them say my femur was broken. Another said my blood pressure was dropping. A third voice mentioned possible internal bleeding. Those words floated above me like they belonged to someone else, someone unlucky, someone I might read about later. But then a paramedic lifted Malik's carrier near my face for one brief second before they loaded us into separate ambulances. His cheeks were wet, his fists were clenched, and there was a tiny scratch near his eyebrow, but his eyes were open. "He is okay," the paramedic promised. "You did the right thing with that car seat." I wanted to thank her. I wanted to touch his face. Instead, darkness rolled over me before I could say another word. When I woke, I was under harsh fluorescent lights in a trauma bay that smelled like antiseptic, plastic, and fear. Machines beeped beside my head. A nurse was pressing gauze to my forehead. My clothes had been cut away. My leg was locked in a temporary splint, but the pain still pulsed through my entire body. I turned my head and nearly fainted. "Where is my son?" I rasped. A nurse leaned closer, her voice gentle but urgent. "He is in the next bay with a pediatric nurse. He is stable." Stable. That word became the only rope keeping me from falling apart. A trauma surgeon stepped into view, his face serious in a way that made my heart pound. Zariah, you have a compound fracture of the left femur, 3 broken ribs, and signs of internal abdominal bleeding. We need to take you into emergency surgery immediately. I nodded because there was no other choice. Do whatever you need to do. Just keep Malik safe. The surgeon looked at the nurse, and that small glance frightened me more than anything he had said. There is an issue we have to solve before we take you upstairs, he continued. You are listed as a single parent, and your baby is not injured badly enough to be admitted as a patient. Hospital policy requires an approved guardian or family member to take custody while you are under anesthesia. I stared at him, confused at first, then horrified as the meaning became clear. He is 8 weeks old, I whispered. He cannot leave with strangers. The nurse touched my shoulder. That is why we need you to call someone now. The surgeon's voice stayed calm, but his words cut straight through me. If no approved person arrives within the hour, we are legally required to contact Child Protective Services for temporary emergency placement. My heart began racing so fast the monitor answered for me. Child Protective Services, temporary placement. My newborn son taken away while I lay unconscious in surgery. No, I said, trying to lift myself, but my broken ribs forced me back down. No, I have family. My parents live less than 40 minutes away. They will come. Even as I said it, a cold uncertainty moved through me. My parents, Valerie and Marcus, had never been soft people. They cared about image, status, country clubs, charity luncheons, and the perfect family portrait they could show the world. My younger sister Nia had always been their golden child, especially after she married Connor, the wealth manager they treated like a prize. I was the quiet daughter, the unmarried one, the one they described as a woman who worked with computers because they never cared enough to understand what I had built. Still, they were my parents. Malik was their grandson. Surely a car accident, emergency surgery, and a crying infant in a trauma unit would matter more than whatever pride or distance had lived between us. The nurse placed my cracked phone into my shaking hand. The screen was broken, but it still worked. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact. I told myself that blood meant something. I told myself that even selfish people knew when an emergency was real. I pressed call and held the phone to my ear as the operating team waited around me. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. My chest tightened with every second. On the 4th ring, the line clicked open, and before my mother said a word, I heard loud tropical music, laughter, and the distant horn of a cruise ship. The moment the line connected, I knew something was wrong. Before my mother even spoke, I could hear loud tropical music, excited laughter, and the distant blast of a cruise ship horn. None of those sounds belonged in a conversation about emergency surgery. None of them belonged in a conversation about an 8-week-old baby who might be handed over to strangers. Yet they were the first things I heard while lying in a trauma bay with blood on my face and a shattered leg. Then my mother's voice came through the speaker. Zariah, make it quick, we are boarding. There was no concern in her voice, no urgency, no fear, just irritation, as though I had interrupted something important. I swallowed hard and tightened my grip on the phone. Mom, I was in a serious accident. For a second, I thought I heard movement on the other end. I thought maybe she was stepping away from the crowd. Maybe she was finally listening. What kind of accident? She asked. A car accident. They are taking me into emergency surgery. My leg is broken. The doctors think I have internal bleeding. The words sounded unreal even as I said them. The room around me blurred for a moment. Machines beeped steadily beside my bed. Nurses moved around me preparing medications and paperwork. My entire future suddenly felt uncertain, but none of that mattered compared to the next sentence. Mom, I need you to come get Malik. Silence. Not shocked silence. Not horrified silence. Annoyed silence. The kind people use when they are calculating how much a problem is going to inconvenience them. What do you mean, come get him? She finally asked. The hospital says someone has to take custody while I am in surgery. He is only 8 weeks old. If nobody comes, they have to contact Child Protective Services. I waited. I expected questions. I expected panic. I expected a grandmother to react like a grandmother. Instead, she sighed heavily. Zariah, are you serious right now? For a moment I thought I had misheard her. What? We are literally standing in the VIP boarding area. The ship leaves in less than an hour. I stared at the ceiling above me. Mom, I do not care about a cruise. Well, maybe you should, she snapped. Do you have any idea how much planning went into this trip? My chest tightened. Every word felt wrong. Every response felt disconnected from reality. Mom, I could die in surgery. Do not be dramatic. Her answer came instantly. The doctors are obviously treating you. You are talking to me right now, aren't you? I felt something cold begin to spread through my body. Not fear, not pain, disbelief. Malik needs someone. Tell the nurses to watch him. They cannot. Then hire somebody. I closed my eyes. What? A nanny. A babysitter. One of those expensive childcare services. You always seem to figure things out. For a few seconds, I could not speak. Around me, doctors discussed operating schedules and medication doses. Somewhere nearby, my baby was waiting for me, and my mother was treating the situation like an inconvenience. Mom, I said quietly, he is your grandson, and Connor is standing right here trying to enjoy a vacation he desperately needs. The mention of Connor made my stomach turn. Somehow, even now, everything was about Connor. Everything was about Nia. Everything was about protecting the comfort of the golden child and her husband. Connor can survive without a cruise. You do not understand how much stress he has been under. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because it was impossible to process what I was hearing. I was lying in a hospital bed after nearly dying in a car accident, and my mother was talking about Connor's stress levels. My son could end up with strangers. Nobody is taking him, she replied dismissively. Stop exaggerating. Before I could answer, I heard voices in the background. Then movement. Then my mother's voice became muffled. A second later, another voice came through the phone. My father. What is going on now? Marcus asked. Dad. Relief rushed through me. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he would hear the situation and immediately leave. Dad, I was in a terrible accident. They are taking me into surgery. I need someone to come get Malik. And where exactly are we supposed to get him? Atlanta Memorial Hospital. Absolutely not. The answer came so quickly that I almost thought he had prepared it in advance. Dad? We are already in Miami. I know. Then what exactly do you expect us to do? Come back. Silence. Then a short laugh. Not a happy laugh. A laugh of disbelief. You expect 4 people to abandon a 10-day vacation because you had a traffic accident? The words hit harder than the crash itself. I almost died, but you did not. I stared at the phone. What? You survived? The baby survived. Problem solved. Every monitor around me suddenly sounded louder. Dad, they are threatening to call Child Protective Services. Then hire someone. I am asking family. Family does not exist solely to solve your problems. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. Not because of the pain, because of the cruelty. He is your grandson, and Nia is my daughter. There it was, the truth. Simple, honest, brutal. Nia came first. She always had. This trip means a lot to her, Marcus continued. Connor has been exhausted. They deserve a break. So Malik does not? Do not twist my words. You are choosing a cruise over your grandson. I am choosing not to throw away thousands of dollars because you failed to plan properly. Failed to plan properly. I repeated the words in my head. Apparently getting hit by a speeding SUV was now a planning issue. Dad, please. My voice cracked. Please. For the first time during the call, I let myself beg. Not for me. For Malik. No. The answer came instantly. Cold. Final. Handle your own responsibilities. I felt something inside me begin to collapse. I could die. You probably won't. I stopped breathing for a second. Around me, nurses exchanged uncomfortable looks. They could hear enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. My father continued speaking. You always create emergencies at the worst possible time. This family cannot revolve around you every time something goes wrong. I was hit by a car, and now you are being treated. End of story. My hand trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. You really are not coming? No. Neither of you? No. Then he lowered his voice. Do not call again until we get home. The line went dead. I stared at the dark screen. For several seconds, I could not move, could not think, could not even cry. The world around me felt distant. The doctors, the lights, the machines, everything faded into the background. My parents had just abandoned their grandson, not because they could not help, because they did not want to. A nurse approached my bed carefully. "I am sorry," she said. I looked up at her. "Did you hear that?" She nodded. "Enough." Her expression softened. "We are running out of time." I already knew what she meant. Child Protective Services, temporary placement, emergency custody. Words that made my heart race. The nurse glanced toward the clock. "The operating room is ready." I looked down at my cracked phone. The screen reflected my exhausted face. Blood, bruises, fear. For a long moment I said nothing. Then the nurse slowly reached for the phone mounted beside the bed. "I have to make the call," she said quietly. I watched her hand move toward the receiver. Then something inside me shifted. The tears stopped. The panic stopped. The helplessness stopped. "Wait." The nurse paused. "What?" I lifted my phone. "Give me 3 more minutes. Zariah, please." Something in my voice made her stop. I looked down at the cracked screen. My family had just abandoned me. My parents had chosen a luxury cruise over their grandson. But there was still one person left I could call. One person who had never treated me like a burden. One person who might actually care whether my son was safe. I opened my contacts and stared at the final name. The line went dead. No goodbye. No hesitation. No last-minute change of heart. 1 second I was begging my parents to help their grandson, and the next I was staring at a dark phone screen while the reality of what had just happened settled over me like a funeral blanket. Around me, the trauma unit continued moving at full speed. Nurses walked between rooms. Doctors reviewed charts. Monitors beeped steadily. Life continued as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside me, something had shifted forever. I slowly lowered the phone onto my chest and stared at the ceiling. The physical pain was still there. My shattered leg felt like it was on fire. Every breath stabbed through my broken ribs. Yet somehow none of it hurt as much as the conversation I had just had with my parents. I had spent 32 years making excuses for them. 32 years convincing myself that underneath the favoritism, the criticism, and the emotional distance, they still loved me. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not equally, but enough. Enough to show up when it mattered. Enough to care when my life was hanging by a thread. I finally understood how wrong I had been. A nurse approached carefully. She had obviously overheard enough of the conversation to understand what had happened. "I am sorry," she said quietly. I nodded without looking at her. "Me too." She hesitated before speaking again. "The operating room is ready." I already knew what came next. If no guardian arrived, the hospital would have no choice but to contact Child Protective Services. The thought made my stomach twist. Somewhere nearby, my 8-week-old son was depending on me to solve a problem I could barely comprehend. The nurse glanced toward the wall clock. "We are running out of time." I closed my eyes. For a moment, memories began surfacing one after another. Not because I wanted them to, because suddenly everything made sense. I remembered being 10 years old and standing in my school's gymnasium after winning a regional math competition. I had searched the crowd looking for my parents. They never came. Nia had a dance recital the same night. They chose the recital. I remembered graduating near the top of my class. My father spent most of the celebration talking about Nia's latest relationship. I remembered launching my first software company. My mother introduced me to her friends as the daughter who works with computers, before spending 20 minutes praising Connor's career. At the time, I convinced myself none of it mattered. I told myself successful people did not need validation. I told myself I was strong enough to handle disappointment. The truth was much uglier. I wanted my parents to be proud of me. I always had. No matter how successful I became. No matter how much money I earned. No matter how many goals I achieved. A part of me was still that little girl standing in the gymnasium looking for her family in the crowd. The difference was that little girl finally understood they were never coming. The nurse reached toward the phone mounted beside my bed. "I need to notify Child Services." The words snapped me back into reality. "Wait." She stopped. "Zariah, we do not have much time." I looked at my cracked phone again. My parents were gone. My sister was gone. Connor was gone. But there was still one person left. One person who had never made me compete for affection. One person who never treated me like an inconvenience. My grandfather, Jeremiah. A small spark of hope appeared for the first time since the accident. I opened my contacts and pressed his name. The phone rang once. Twice. Then he answered. Zariah? His voice immediately sounded concerned. Grandpa. The moment I heard him, my composure cracked. For the first time since the crash, I felt safe enough to stop pretending I was okay. What happened? He asked. I was in an accident. The silence that followed lasted less than a second. Are you hurt? Yes. How badly? Broken leg. Internal bleeding. Emergency surgery. His breathing changed. Not panic. Focus. Jeremiah had spent his entire life solving problems. I could practically hear his mind working. And Malik? He is okay. My voice trembled. But the hospital needs someone to take custody while I am in surgery. Another pause. Where are your parents? I laughed bitterly. Boarding a cruise ship. This time the silence lasted longer. They refused? They told me to hire a nanny. For several seconds he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was colder than I had ever heard before. Give me the hospital name, I told him. Good. Grandpa, listen carefully. His tone became firm. Do not waste another second worrying about Malik. Tears filled my eyes again. I do not know what to do. You do not need to. What? I will handle it. 4 simple words. Yet they carried more comfort than everything my parents had said during the past 32 years. I closed my eyes and took a shaky breath. You are hours away. Then I will drive. The surgery cannot wait. Then we solve the problem before I arrive. The certainty in his voice was absolute. He was not making promises. He was making decisions. For the first time that day, I believed everything might be okay. Thank you, I whispered. You do not thank family for showing up. The words hit me harder than he probably intended, because showing up was exactly what my parents had refused to do. Jeremiah continued. Focus on getting through surgery. Let me worry about the rest. Okay. And Zariah? Yes? You are not alone. I covered my eyes with my free hand. I know. We ended the call. The nurse stepped closer. Was that your grandfather? Yes. Is he coming? I nodded. Then let's get you through this. A few minutes later, the surgical team returned. Consent forms were finalized. Medication was prepared. My hospital bed began moving toward the operating floor. As the wheels rolled through the brightly lit hallway, I stared up at the ceiling passing overhead. Something inside me felt different. The pain remained, the betrayal remained, but the desperation was gone. For the first time, I was no longer begging my family to choose me. They already had, and they had chosen someone else. The operating room doors came into view. Bright lights spilled across the hallway. The anesthesiologist greeted me and began explaining the next steps. His voice faded in and out as medication entered my IV. The last thing I remember before the room started blurring was looking down at my phone one final time. No missed calls from my parents. No messages, no apologies. Nothing. I slipped the phone onto the tray beside me and closed my eyes. Somewhere behind me, a grandfather was already on his way. Somewhere ahead of me, my entire life was about to change. When I opened my eyes again, the first thing I heard was the steady rhythm of a heart monitor. The second was pain. It wrapped itself around my entire body like a vice, reminding me exactly where I was before I could even focus on the room. For several seconds, I stared at the ceiling above me, struggling to separate reality from the haze of anesthesia. Then the memories returned. The crash, the hospital, my parents, the cruise, Malik. I immediately tried to sit up. A sharp pain shot through my side, forcing me back onto the bed. Easy. A nurse appeared beside me. Your surgery was successful, Malik. My voice came out rough and weak. Where is my son? The nurse smiled. Safe. Relief hit me so hard I nearly started crying. With my grandfather? Yes. I closed my eyes for a moment and simply breathed. For the first time since the accident, I felt completely certain that Malik was protected. Nobody was taking him away. Nobody was handing him to strangers. Jeremiah had done exactly what he promised. He had shown up. The nurse adjusted my IV. You've been asleep for several hours. How long? Most of the night. I nodded slowly. Everything hurt, but at least the worst fear was gone. A few minutes later, the door opened and Jeremiah stepped into the room. The moment I saw him, emotion flooded through me. He looked exhausted. His gray hair was slightly disheveled. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes carried the strain of a man who had driven through the night without stopping. Yet he was there. He crossed the room and gently squeezed my hand. "Hey, kiddo." My throat tightened. "You came." A faint smile appeared on his face. "Of course I came." The simplicity of the answer almost broke me. "Of course I came." 4 words my parents could have said but never did. Jeremiah pulled a chair closer and sat beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." "Close enough." For the first time since waking up, I laughed. It hurt immediately. "Don't make me laugh." "Then stop saying funny things." We sat quietly for a moment. Then I noticed something unusual in his expression. Beneath the concern and relief was something else. Anger. Jeremiah was one of the calmest people I knew. It took a lot to genuinely anger him. "You talked to my parents?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "I did." "How did that go?" "About as well as you'd expect." I looked away. "I don't want to talk about them." "Good." His voice became firm. "Neither do I." Another silence followed. Then Jeremiah leaned back slightly. "There is something you need to understand, Zariah." I looked at him. "What?" "This accident didn't create a problem." "What do you mean?" "It revealed one." I frowned. "Grandpa." He sighed heavily. "Your parents have spent years taking advantage of you." I immediately shook my head. "That's not true." The words came out automatically. A reflex. The same reflex I had been using my entire life. Jeremiah simply watched me. "Really? They aren't perfect, but—" "Zariah," he interrupted me gently. "Do you know how much money you've given them over the last decade?" I opened my mouth, then stopped. "I don't know." "I do." His answer surprised me. "What?" "I've been keeping track." My confusion deepened. "Why?" Jeremiah looked at me carefully. "Because I was worried this day would come." A strange feeling settled into my stomach. "What day?" "The day you finally realized the relationship wasn't balanced." I stared at him. He continued. "How much do you send your parents every month?" 5,500. "And how long have you been doing that?" "Almost 10 years." Jeremiah nodded. "Exactly." Suddenly, I understood where he was going. My eyes widened slightly. "Wait. $5,500 every month, Grandpa. For nearly a decade." He paused. "That is more than $600,000. The number sounded unreal when spoken aloud. I knew I helped my parents financially. I knew the amount wasn't small. But hearing the total hit differently. $600,000. More than most people earned in several lifetimes," Jeremiah continued. "Do you know what bothers me the most?" "What?" "Not the money." His eyes hardened. "The fact that they convinced themselves they were entitled to it." I looked down at my blanket. Memories began surfacing. Expensive vacations, home renovations, luxury vehicles, club memberships. Every time my parents needed something, I quietly helped. Every time they wanted something, I found a way to provide it. I never talked about it publicly. I never asked for gratitude. I simply wanted them to be comfortable. "They thought it came from Grandma's trust," I said quietly. Jeremiah laughed once. "No, they didn't." I looked up. "What?" "Maybe in the beginning." "What do you mean?" "Your mother and father aren't stupid." He leaned forward. "After the first few years, they knew exactly where the money was coming from." That statement stunned me. No. Yes. They never said anything, because acknowledging it would require gratitude. The room suddenly felt smaller. "How do you know?" Jeremiah hesitated briefly. Then he answered. "Because your father told me." I stared at him. "When?" 3 years ago." My heart sank. "What did he say?" Jeremiah's expression darkened. "He said it was nice that one of his daughters had finally become useful." The words hit harder than the accident. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. "He said that?" Jeremiah nodded. "And that's when I realized something. What? Your parents didn't see your support as generosity. His voice became cold. They saw it as an obligation. I looked away before he could see the tears forming again. Everything suddenly made sense. The entitlement, the dismissiveness, the lack of appreciation. They weren't grateful because they believed they deserved everything I gave them. I don't understand, I whispered. How did we get here? Jeremiah studied me for a moment. Because you spent your entire life trying to earn love from people who had already decided who mattered more. The truth hurt because it was accurate. Deep down, I had always known. I simply never wanted to admit it. You know what the saddest part is? Jeremiah asked quietly. What? Even after everything they've done, you're still defending them. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't, because he wasn't. The room fell silent again. Finally, Jeremiah stood. Get some rest. Grandpa. He stopped near the door. Yes? Why are you telling me all this now? For the first time during the conversation, he looked genuinely serious. Because after what happened yesterday, there are some truths you need to know. A chill moved through me. What truths? Jeremiah looked at me for several seconds before answering. The accident isn't the only crisis heading toward this family. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? He slowly shook his head. We'll talk about it when you're stronger. Grandpa. Not yet. Then he opened the door. But trust me. His voice dropped lower. The cruise is the least of your parents' problems. And with that, he walked out of the room, leaving me staring after him and wondering what secret could possibly be serious enough to make Jeremiah look afraid. The next morning, I woke up thinking Jeremiah's warning had been nothing more than an old man's anger toward his son and daughter-in-law. The pain medication made everything feel distant, and for a few hours, I convinced myself that the worst was over. I had survived surgery. Malik was safe. Jeremiah was here. Nothing else mattered. Then I turned on my phone. More than 30 missed calls immediately appeared on the screen. Every single one came from the same three people. My mother, my father, my sister Nia. I stared at the notifications in disbelief. 24 hours earlier, they had refused to help their grandson. Now they suddenly could not stop calling. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Something had changed. The phone buzzed again before I could process the list. Nia. I ignored it. A few seconds later, another call appeared. My father. I ignored that one too. Then a text message arrived. Zariah, call us immediately. It's urgent. I almost laughed. Everything was urgent now. Apparently my accident had not been urgent enough. My surgery had not been urgent enough. Malik had not been urgent enough. But suddenly they needed me. I locked the screen and set the phone aside. The door opened moments later, and Jeremiah entered carrying a coffee cup. One look at my face told him something was wrong. What happened? He asked. I held up the phone. They've been calling all morning. Jeremiah wasn't surprised. I figured they would. Why? He sat down slowly. Because reality finally reached Miami. My eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Jeremiah looked toward the window before answering. Tell me something. Have your parents ever asked where the money came from? Not really. Exactly. What are you saying? I'm saying they got comfortable. I remained silent. Jeremiah continued. For years, they treated your support like an automatic payment, like a utility bill, something that simply existed. I knew he was right. Every month the money arrived. Every month their lifestyle improved. Eventually nobody talked about it anymore. What happened? I asked. Jeremiah's expression remained calm. Your monthly transfer didn't arrive. I blinked. What? The hospital stay interrupted several things. Suddenly I remembered. Before surgery, several accounts had been temporarily frozen while my financial team verified activity after the accident. Standard security procedures, nothing unusual. But for the first time in years, my parents had not received their monthly payment. That's why they're calling? Jeremiah nodded. Partly. I stared at him. You mean they're panicking over one missed transfer? Not exactly. He leaned back. The missed transfer created questions. What kind of questions? Questions about how dependent they've become. I looked down at my blanket. The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became. I had never intended to create dependence. I only wanted to help. Do you know what your father's biggest fear is? Jeremiah asked. No. Losing status. That answer came instantly. Everything your parents do revolves around appearance. He wasn't wrong. My parents lived in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in their area. They belonged to private clubs. They hosted events. They surrounded themselves with people who measured success through appearances. Maintaining that image required money. A lot of money. How much are they spending? I asked. Jeremiah laughed softly. More than they should? That's not an answer. Because the answer is embarrassing. A nurse entered briefly to check my vitals before leaving again. Once the room was quiet, Jeremiah continued. Your parents have structured their entire lifestyle around income they didn't earn. The words lingered in the air. Income they didn't earn. Suddenly, for the first time, I viewed the situation from a different perspective. They weren't simply receiving help. They were building a life around my support. That isn't my fault, I said quietly. No. Jeremiah nodded. It isn't. Then why do I feel guilty? Because you've spent your entire life carrying responsibility that belongs to other people. The answer landed harder than I expected. Another buzz came from my phone. Then another. Then another. Nia again. I opened the latest message. Please answer. Dad is freaking out. I handed the phone to Jeremiah. He read the message and sighed. Predictable. What are they afraid of? That depends. On what? How much your father knows. I frowned. Knows about what? Jeremiah became quiet again. The silence immediately caught my attention. Every time he became this careful, it meant he was deciding how much information to reveal. Grandpa. He looked at me. There's something else going on, isn't there? He didn't answer immediately. Grandpa. Finally he nodded. Yes. My pulse quickened. What? Jeremiah folded his hands together. Tell me something first. Okay. Have you ever wondered why your parents became so protective of Connor? I immediately thought of my brother-in-law. Connor could do no wrong in their eyes. Every mistake was excused. Every problem was defended. Every criticism was treated like an attack on the family itself. All the time, I admitted. Good. Jeremiah nodded slowly. Because you're finally asking the right question. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? 3 years ago, Connor created a financial problem. What kind of problem? The kind that destroys careers. The room suddenly felt very quiet. I don't understand. Neither did I at first. Jeremiah stood and walked toward the window. At the time, I assumed it was a simple mistake. And? It wasn't. Every instinct in my body told me the conversation was heading somewhere dangerous. What happened? Jeremiah turned toward me. I can't tell you everything yet. Why not? Because I need proof before I accuse someone of something this serious. Frustration flashed through me. Then why bring it up? Because your parents' behavior makes more sense once you know part of the truth. He paused. Their loyalty to Connor isn't emotional. What is it? Jeremiah held my gaze. It's fear. A chill moved through my body. Fear of what? That's exactly what I've been trying to figure out. My phone buzzed again. This time my mother left a voicemail. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Jeremiah looked toward the device. Listen to it. Now? Now. I pressed play. My mother's voice immediately filled the room. But it wasn't the voice of a concerned parent. It wasn't even the voice of someone checking on her injured daughter. She sounded frantic. Zariah, call us back immediately. Something is wrong with the account. Your father says there must be a mistake. Call us as soon as you get this. The message ended. I slowly lowered the phone. Not once had she asked how I was feeling. Not once had she mentioned the surgery. Not once had she asked about Malik, only the account. Jeremiah watched my reaction carefully. Do you see it now? I didn't answer. Because for the first time in my life, I did. And the realization was far more painful than the crash that put me in that hospital bed. I replayed the voicemail 3 times after Jeremiah left the room. Each time, I listened for something different. A question about my surgery. A question about Malik. A single sentence that sounded remotely like concern. It never came. The entire message revolved around one thing. Money. More specifically, money they suddenly could not access. By the 4th replay, I stopped feeling shocked. The shock had already burned itself out. What remained was disappointment, quiet, exhausting disappointment. Late that afternoon, another voicemail arrived, then another, then another. By evening, my phone contained more messages from my parents than I had received from them during the previous 6 months combined. Every message sounded increasingly desperate. Not worried, desperate. There was a difference. Worry focuses on people. Desperation focuses on consequences. My parents were not worried about me. They were worried about whatever was happening on the other side of their missing money. The following morning, I finally answered one of the calls. The moment I pressed accept, my father's voice exploded through the speaker. "Where have you been?" Not hello. Not how are you feeling. Not are you alive. Just anger. I stared at the phone in disbelief. "Good morning to you too. This isn't funny, Zariah. Neither was my surgery." Silence, brief but noticeable. Then he continued as if I had said nothing. "There is a problem with the account." "What account?" "Don't play games." "I'm not." The monthly transfer didn't arrive. I looked toward the window. The city skyline stretched across the horizon, while my father complained about money from the comfort of a luxury cruise ship. The contrast would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. "I've been in surgery." "That has nothing to do with this." I actually laughed. "Are you hearing yourself? The transfer has never been late." "Dad, something is wrong. I nearly died. And thankfully you didn't." He sounded irritated, as though my accident was a scheduling inconvenience. "Can we focus on the actual problem?" For several seconds I could not speak. The actual problem. Those words kept repeating in my head. Somewhere along the way, my parents had stopped viewing me as a daughter and started viewing me as a financial system. A resource, a payment processor, something designed to support their lifestyle. "What exactly do you need from me?" I finally asked. Relief entered his voice immediately. "Now we're getting somewhere." The change was so obvious it made me sick. "The account needs to be fixed." "Maybe it doesn't." Silence. "What does that mean?" "Maybe nothing is broken." My father's tone hardened. "Zariah, I'm serious. The money has always arrived. And? And people rely on it." There it was. Not gratitude, not appreciation. Reliance. Entitlement disguised as necessity. "People?" I asked. "Who exactly are these people?" "Your mother and I, for starters." "Interesting. What's that supposed to mean?" I adjusted my position carefully, trying to ignore the pain in my ribs. "It means I don't remember forcing either of you to structure your lives around my money." His breathing changed. "This isn't the time for attitude." "No," I said quietly. "I think it's exactly the time." The line became silent. Then another voice entered the conversation. My mother. "Zariah? Hi, Mom. Thank God. We've been trying to reach you." I noticed. We were worried. The lie arrived so quickly it almost impressed me. "Really?" "Of course. Then why didn't you ask how I was doing?" Silence. Not a long silence, just long enough. "Well, how are you feeling?" Too late. We both knew it. My mother immediately shifted topics. "The bank says a transfer was interrupted." There it was again. Money. Always money. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "What?" "When you found out I needed emergency surgery, what was your first thought?" She hesitated. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one." Another pause. "I don't know." "I do." She didn't answer. "Your first thought was whether the transfer would still arrive." "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" My mother's voice sharpened. "After everything we've done for you." I almost dropped the phone. "Done for me?" "Yes." I laughed again. This time there was no humor in it. "Mom, you abandoned your grandson." "We were already boarding." "You abandoned your grandson." "You keep repeating that." "Because it's true." My mother went quiet. My father immediately jumped back into the conversation. "Enough." "No. We've heard enough accusations." "Then maybe stop giving me reasons to make them." The argument continued for another 10 minutes. By the end, nothing had changed. They still wanted the money restored. I still couldn't believe what I was hearing. Eventually, my father lost patience. "Fine," he snapped. "We'll discuss this when we get home." Then he hung up. I stared at the screen for a long moment. A strange calm settled over me. Not peace. Clarity. For years, I had viewed the financial support as an act of love, something generous, something voluntary. My parents viewed it differently. To them, it was income, expected income, guaranteed income. And that realization changed everything. Later that evening, Jeremiah returned. One look at my face told him I had spoken with them. How bad? He asked. Worse than I expected. That's saying something. I handed him the phone and summarized the conversation. By the time I finished, he looked completely unsurprised. You know what the real problem is? He asked. What? Your parents think the money belongs to them. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped, because I knew he was right. What happens if I stop? I asked quietly. Jeremiah studied me carefully. Do you want the honest answer? Yes. Their entire world starts falling apart. The statement hung in the air between us. It can't be that bad. It is. How? Jeremiah sat down. Because what you see is a comfortable retirement. And what I see is a lifestyle balanced on top of financial support they can no longer afford to lose. My stomach tightened. You really think it's that serious? I know it is. How? Jeremiah looked toward the door to make sure nobody else was listening. Then he lowered his voice. Because 6 months ago I started looking into your father's finances. Every muscle in my body tensed. Why? Because something wasn't adding up. What wasn't? Jeremiah held my gaze for several seconds. The amount of money leaving their accounts. A chill moved through me. What did you find? Jeremiah leaned forward slowly. Enough to convince me that your parents are hiding something. The room suddenly felt smaller. What kind of something? He shook his head. I don't know yet. Grandpa. Not yet. His voice became firm. But trust me, Zariah. He paused. The missing transfer is about to expose a lot more than financial dependence. And for the first time since the accident, I began wondering whether the money was only the beginning of a much larger disaster waiting for my family. 3 days later, my doctor finally allowed me to leave the hospital. I was nowhere near fully recovered. Walking required crutches. My ribs still felt like shattered glass every time I moved the wrong way. The bruises covering my body had turned deep shades of purple and yellow. But none of that mattered the moment I saw Malik again. Jeremiah carried him into the room while I was signing discharge paperwork. The second I heard my son's tiny voice, everything else disappeared. I reached for him carefully, afraid of hurting myself, and Jeremiah gently placed him in my arms. Malik stared up at me for a moment before grabbing my finger. I felt tears forming instantly. Hey, buddy! He blinked as if nothing extraordinary had happened, as if the worst week of my life had simply been another ordinary day. Jeremiah smiled. He's been waiting for you. I think that's my line. Trust me, he complained constantly. For the first time in days, I laughed without forcing it. The drive home was quiet. Jeremiah insisted on handling everything. He drove, he carried bags, he checked on Malik every few minutes. The entire time, my phone continued buzzing with calls and messages from my parents. I ignored every one of them. By now, the pattern was impossible to miss. Not a single message asked about my recovery. Every conversation eventually returned to money. The moment I arrived home, another voicemail appeared. This time it was my mother. Zariah, your father is becoming extremely stressed. Please call us. The account situation is getting serious. I deleted it without listening twice. Jeremiah watched from the kitchen. Still no questions about your health? Not one. He shook his head. Then stop expecting different behavior. I knew he was right. But accepting the truth and emotionally processing it were two different things. That evening, after putting Malik to sleep, I opened my laptop for the first time since the accident. My company executives had been handling operations while I recovered. Hundreds of emails waited for me. Most involved routine business matters. A few involved security alerts triggered after the crash. One message immediately caught my attention. It came from my personal financial manager. The subject line was simple: Unusual Account Activity Report. I opened it. Within seconds, my stomach tightened. Several automatic payments connected to my parents' lifestyle had failed during the previous week. Club memberships, luxury vehicle leases, vacation-related expenses, home service contracts. I stared at the list in disbelief. I knew I helped my parents financially. What I didn't realize was how deeply connected that support had become. The amount being spent every month was staggering. More surprising was how quickly problems began appearing once the transfers stopped. I printed the report and carried it into the living room where Jeremiah was reading. He glanced at the pages and nodded. "You finally see it. This is insane." "No," he pointed at the numbers. "This is dependency." I sat down slowly. "How did it get this bad?" "One small compromise at a time." I studied the documents again. They built their entire lifestyle around this. Exactly. And they never told me. Jeremiah laughed softly. "Why would they?" "Because normal people communicate. You're assuming this situation is normal." I couldn't argue with that. The more I reviewed the numbers, the more uncomfortable I became. Then I noticed something unusual. Several large expenses were connected to accounts I didn't recognize. "What are these?" Jeremiah looked at the page. His expression immediately changed. "Interesting." "What?" He took the report from my hands. "I've seen these account numbers before." "Where?" He remained silent for several seconds. "Grandpa, remember what I told you about Connor?" My pulse quickened. "The financial problem?" He nodded. "These accounts are connected to him." I sat upright. "How?" "I don't know yet." "Then how do you know they're connected?" Jeremiah pointed toward one of the entries. "Because I've been seeing this same account appear in several places." A cold feeling moved through my chest. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying your parents may be paying for more than their own lifestyle." Suddenly the room felt very quiet. "You think they're supporting Connor?" "I think money is moving around in ways that don't make sense." "How much money?" Jeremiah looked down at the report. "Enough to get my attention." Before I could ask another question, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't my parents. It was Nia. I almost ignored it. Then curiosity won. "Hello?" The relief in her voice was immediate. "Thank God. What do you want?" Silence. Then an awkward laugh. "That's a little harsh. Try being abandoned in a hospital." Her tone changed instantly. "We're still doing this?" I closed my eyes. "Why are you calling?" "Dad's losing his mind." There it was. Not concern. Not an apology. Straight to the problem. "And?" "The money situation is becoming a disaster." "For who?" "For everyone." "Interesting. What does that mean?" I looked at Jeremiah. He was listening carefully. "It means nobody seemed worried when my life was a disaster." Nia sighed dramatically. "Can we please focus on solving this?" "This?" "The transfer problem." I laughed. "You still think it's a technical issue, isn't it?" "No." Silence filled the line. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing is broken." Another pause. This one lasted longer. "Wait." Her voice became cautious. "Are you saying you stopped the payments?" "I'm saying I haven't restarted them." For several seconds, she said nothing. Then her breathing became noticeably faster. "Zariah." "What?" "You can't do that." The statement shocked me. Not because she said it, because she genuinely believed it. "Why not?" "Because people depend on that money." The exact same phrase my father had used. I looked at Jeremiah. He looked back at me. We both noticed it immediately. "Which people?" I asked quietly. Nia hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough. "Everyone." She was lying. I could hear it. For the first time, I became absolutely certain that something larger was happening behind the scenes. Something nobody wanted me to see. "Nia." "What?" "Who are you really worried about?" The line went silent. A silence so complete that I could hear her breathing. Then she disconnected without another word. I slowly lowered the phone. Jeremiah looked thoughtful. "That's interesting. You heard that too?" He nodded. "She wasn't worried about your parents." "No. She was worried about someone else." I stared at the dark screen in my hand. For days, I had believed the missing money was exposing financial dependence. Now I was beginning to suspect it was exposing something far more dangerous. And somewhere inside that mystery, Connor's name kept appearing. After the call with Nia ended, I couldn't stop thinking about her reaction. It wasn't what she said that bothered me. It was what she almost said. For years, I had known my sister well enough to recognize when she was hiding something. Whenever she became nervous, Her answers grew shorter. Whenever she felt trapped, she changed the subject. And whenever she was protecting someone, she became defensive almost immediately. That was exactly what had happened during our conversation. She wasn't worried about my parents, she was worried about Connor. The realization stayed with me for the next several days. While I focused on recovery and caring for Malik, the messages from my family continued arriving. My father alternated between anger and desperation. My mother switched between guilt and manipulation. Nia mostly stayed silent. Connor never contacted me at all. That fact bothered me more than I expected. If his life truly wasn't connected to the missing money, why wasn't he staying out of the situation? Why was everyone acting like the disappearance of one monthly transfer had suddenly become a family emergency? One afternoon, Jeremiah arrived carrying a large folder. The moment I saw his expression, I knew something had changed. He placed the folder on the dining table and sat down across from me. I found something. My stomach tightened immediately. About Connor? Jeremiah nodded. Partly. What does that mean? He opened the folder slowly. Inside were printed financial records, property documents, and bank statements. Most of it meant nothing to me at first glance. Jeremiah pointed to one page near the top. Do you recognize this account? I looked down. The number seemed vaguely familiar. Then I remembered. It's one of the accounts from the expense report. Correct. What is it? Jeremiah leaned back. That's what I've been trying to determine. He slid another document toward me. 3 years ago, Connor opened a private investment company. I know. Do you? I frowned. What does that mean? Most people think Connor works for a wealth management firm. He does. Officially. The word immediately caught my attention. Officially? And unofficially? Jeremiah folded his arms. That's where things become interesting. He explained that Connor had spent years presenting himself as a brilliant financial expert. Friends trusted him. Clients trusted him. Even my parents treated him like a financial genius. But according to Jeremiah, several irregularities had begun appearing years earlier. Small inconsistencies, missing transactions, unusual transfers. Nothing large enough to trigger immediate alarm, but enough to attract attention if someone looked closely. You think he's stealing? I asked. I think money is disappearing. That's not the same thing. Exactly, Jeremiah nodded. Which is why I'm being careful. I studied the paperwork again. How are my parents connected? I don't know yet, but they're connected somehow. Absolutely. The certainty in his voice made me uneasy. Jeremiah wasn't someone who jumped to conclusions. If he sounded convinced, he had reasons. Have you told anyone? I asked. No. Not even me until now. Because I needed evidence first. He tapped the folder. Now I'm starting to get it. A knock interrupted the conversation. We both looked toward the front door. Jeremiah frowned. Are you expecting someone? No. Another knock followed, this one louder. I carefully stood and moved toward the entrance. When I opened the door, I froze. My parents were standing outside. My mother looked exhausted. My father looked furious. Neither expression surprised me. What are you doing here? I asked. My mother immediately stepped forward. Can we come in? Why? My father's patience disappeared instantly. Because we've been trying to reach you for days. I've noticed. Then answer your phone. I stared at him. You mean like you answered yours when I was in a trauma unit? His face darkened. My mother quickly stepped between us. Can we please not do this right now? Actually, I said calmly, this seems like the perfect time. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Eventually, Jeremiah appeared behind me. The moment my parents saw him, their expressions changed. Not dramatically, just enough. A flash of tension, a hint of discomfort. Jeremiah noticed it too. Valerie. Marcus. His greeting was polite but cold. Nobody moved for several seconds. Finally, my mother cleared her throat. We need to talk. About what? I asked. The family. I almost laughed. Suddenly, everyone cared about family. Be specific. My father crossed his arms. The financial situation. There it was. Straight to the point. Not my recovery. Not Malik. Not the accident. Money. Always money. Jeremiah quietly walked back toward the dining room. My parents followed. Within minutes, all four of us were sitting around the table. The atmosphere felt less like a family discussion and more like a business negotiation. My father spoke first. The transfers need to resume. No apology, no concern, just a demand. Why? I asked. He blinked. What? Why do they need to resume? Because responsibilities exist. Whose responsibilities? Yours. I stared at him in disbelief. You think supporting your lifestyle is my responsibility? I think family takes care of family. The hypocrisy was almost impressive. Interesting philosophy. My father leaned forward. This isn't a joke. Neither was my surgery. My mother sighed. Can we move past that? The room instantly became silent. Even Jeremiah looked shocked. Move past it? I repeated. You abandoned your grandson. We said we were sorry. No, I corrected. You said the cruise was important. My father slammed a hand onto the table. Enough. The sudden outburst startled everyone. For a brief moment, I saw genuine fear behind his anger. Not frustration, fear. Then it vanished. The money needs to be restored immediately, he said. Why? I asked again. Because people are counting on it. The answer was identical every single time. People are counting on it. Not we are counting on it. People. The same mysterious people. The same vague explanation. Suddenly, Jeremiah spoke. Which people, Marcus? My father's eyes immediately shifted toward him. What? You heard me. Jeremiah's voice remained calm. Which people? For the first time all afternoon, my father looked genuinely uncomfortable. And in that moment, I became certain of one thing. Whatever secret he was hiding had finally started catching up to him. The room remained silent after Jeremiah's question. Which people? It should have been an easy answer. If my parents truly needed financial help for ordinary living expenses, they could have simply said so. Instead, my father stared across the table without speaking. My mother looked down at her hands. Neither of them seemed willing to answer. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. Jeremiah waited patiently. Marcus? My father finally cleared his throat. There are obligations. That's not what I asked. Some situations are complicated. Jeremiah nodded slowly. Then explain them. My father's jaw tightened. For years, he had been the loudest voice in every room. The man who always had an answer. The man who never admitted weakness. Watching him struggle now felt strange. This is family business. Jeremiah almost smiled. Exactly. So, let's discuss it. My mother suddenly spoke. Maybe this conversation should happen privately. Why? I asked. Because some details are unnecessary. Unnecessary for who? She didn't answer. The tension in the room grew heavier with every second. Finally, my father stood from his chair and walked toward the window. Connor had some investment difficulties. Jeremiah immediately looked at him. Difficulties? Temporary setbacks. Interesting choice of words. My father turned around. What exactly are you implying? Jeremiah remained calm. Nothing. I'm asking questions. Then stop questioning Connor. The response came too quickly, too emotionally. My grandfather noticed it immediately. So did I. Why are you protecting him? I asked. My father looked at me. Because he's family. The answer almost made me laugh. Family. The word suddenly appeared whenever money was involved. Yet it had been completely absent when I was lying in a hospital bed. You weren't very concerned about family last week, I said quietly. My father's face darkened. We're not discussing that again. Maybe we should. No. Why? Because the situation has already been handled. I stared at him. Handled by who? Neither of us needed to say the answer out loud. Me. The same daughter they couldn't make time for during a medical emergency. The same daughter whose money had quietly solved problems for years. Jeremiah leaned forward slightly. How much? Everyone looked at him. What? My father asked. How much money has Connor lost? Silence. My mother shifted uncomfortably. My father looked away. That reaction alone was enough. The number was significant. Very significant. Marcus. Jeremiah's voice became firmer. How much? It's complicated. No. Jeremiah shook his head. Numbers are actually very simple. My father rubbed his forehead. We're working through it. That's not an answer. The conversation felt like watching a wall slowly crack apart. Every question revealed another weakness. Every answer created more suspicion. Finally, my mother looked at my father. Just tell them. He closed his eyes briefly. Then he sat back down. Connor made several investment decisions that didn't work out. For himself? Jeremiah asked. For clients? The room became completely silent. Even the air seemed heavier. Clients? Jeremiah repeated. My father nodded. Some people lost money. How much? I don't know. Jeremiah immediately laughed, not because anything was funny, because he didn't believe it. Neither did I. You expect us to believe you've spent years defending Connor without knowing the numbers? My father remained silent. Jeremiah's expression hardened. Try again. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then my father finally looked directly at me. More than $1 million. I felt my stomach drop. $1 million? Approximately. Clients lost over $1 million? My father nodded. The room seemed to spin slightly. I looked toward Jeremiah. He wasn't surprised. That frightened me more than the number itself. You knew? I asked. I suspected. For how long? A while. My mother immediately jumped in. Before anyone starts making assumptions, Connor never intended for this to happen. Jeremiah turned toward her. That's your defense? People make mistakes. $1 million mistakes? My mother looked away. Nobody had a response for that. Suddenly, several pieces started falling into place. The strange financial records, the hidden accounts, the desperate phone calls, the panic surrounding the missing transfers. It was never about vacations or luxury spending. Something much bigger was happening. Wait, I looked at my father. What does any of this have to do with my money? Nobody answered immediately. That was answer enough. Dad. His shoulders dropped slightly. For the first time, he looked tired. Truly tired. Some of the funds helped stabilize things. My pulse quickened. What funds? Financial support. I stared at him. My financial support? He didn't answer. Dad. Temporarily. The word exploded inside my head. Temporarily. As if that somehow made everything acceptable. You're telling me money I gave you ended up helping Connor? My mother immediately leaned forward. It wasn't like that. Then explain it. The situation was complicated. Stop saying that. My voice rose for the first time. Every time someone asks a question, you say it's complicated. The room fell silent again. Jeremiah finally spoke. How much? My father looked down at the table. I don't know exactly. How much? Jeremiah repeated. Several long seconds passed. Then my father answered. Several $100,000. I felt all the air leave my lungs. Several $100,000. Money I believed was helping my parents enjoy retirement. Money I thought was supporting family. Money that had quietly disappeared into a problem nobody told me existed. My mother reached toward me. Zariah, please understand. No. I pulled my hand away. You understand. Tears threatened to form, but I forced them back. You all made decisions about my money without even telling me the truth. Nobody argued. Nobody denied it. Because they couldn't. For the first time, the full picture was beginning to emerge. My parents hadn't become dependent on my support by accident. They had become dependent because they were using it for purposes I never agreed to. And if Connor's losses were truly that large, then one question remained. A question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. I looked directly at Jeremiah. What happens if Connor can't pay that money back? My grandfather's expression became grim. That's exactly the question I've been investigating. And judging by the look in his eyes, I wasn't going to like the answer. The moment my parents left the house, I knew they had not told us everything. Their answers had been too careful. Their explanations had been too rehearsed. Most importantly, neither of them seemed shocked that hundreds of thousands of dollars had disappeared. They seemed frightened that the truth was finally being discussed. After the front door closed, I sat quietly at the dining table while Jeremiah organized the documents spread before us. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Malik slept peacefully in the next room, completely unaware that the foundations of my family were beginning to crack apart. Finally, I broke the silence. How long have you known? Jeremiah looked up. Known what? That my parents were lying. He sighed heavily. Longer than I wanted to. I stared at the paperwork covering the table. Every page seemed to raise more questions than answers. Then stop protecting me. Jeremiah's eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? Tell me everything. For a moment, he simply studied my face. Then he slowly opened a different folder. Unlike the others, this one looked older. The pages were worn from years of handling. Several documents had colored tabs attached to the edges. Jeremiah slid the folder across the table. Start here. I opened it carefully. The first page immediately caught my attention. It carried the name of my grandmother's educational trust. My stomach tightened. Why are we looking at this? Keep reading. I turned the page. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, confusion turned into disbelief. The trust records showed annual growth, stable growth, healthy growth. There were no catastrophic losses, no market collapse, no financial disaster. The account had remained strong for years. This can't be right. Jeremiah remained silent. I continued reading. Every page told the same story. The trust had performed well, extremely well. Yet that wasn't what I had been told growing up. At 18, my parents sat me down and explained that the educational fund created by my grandmother no longer contained enough money to support my future plans. They blamed market conditions. They blamed investment performance. They blamed circumstances. I believed them. I had no reason not to. Grandpa. My voice felt distant. The money was still there. Yes. All those years? Yes. I looked back at the documents. My hands began shaking. Then why did they tell me it was gone? Jeremiah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the folder and pulled out another set of records. These were different. Withdrawal records. My pulse immediately accelerated. One withdrawal, then another, then another. Large amounts. Massive amounts. The farther I read, the worse it became. Hundreds of thousands of dollars disappeared over multiple years. The total exceeded $1 million. I felt sick. Who authorized these? Jeremiah looked directly at me. Your parents. I stared at him. No. Zariah. No. I pushed the papers away. There has to be another explanation. I wish there was. I stood too quickly and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through my leg. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. None of it felt real. My entire adult life had been built around a lie. I remembered applying for scholarships because I thought my educational fund had vanished. I remembered working long hours while other students focused on studying. I remembered turning down opportunities because money was tight. Every sacrifice suddenly came rushing back. They watched me struggle. My voice barely rose above a whisper. Jeremiah nodded slowly. Yes. They knew the money existed. Yes. And they said nothing. Yes. The room became painfully quiet. I sat down again and covered my face with my hands. For years, I had convinced myself that my parents made mistakes. Ordinary mistakes. Human mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. A deliberate choice, repeated over and over again. Why? Jeremiah leaned back in his chair. That's the question I've been asking myself. I lowered my hands. You know why? He didn't deny it. Part of the answer. Connor. Jeremiah looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. It was Connor. Not entirely, but he was involved. Yes. My heart sank. Every road seemed to lead back to him. Every secret. Every missing dollar. Every strange reaction. How much? I asked quietly. Jeremiah understood immediately. I don't know the exact amount. Give me your best estimate. He hesitated. Several $100,000. I closed my eyes. The number hit harder now than it had during our earlier conversation. Several $100,000. Money taken from a trust my grandmother created for me. Money my parents secretly redirected somewhere else. Money connected to Connor's problems. Did Nia know? I asked. Jeremiah thought for a moment. I honestly don't know. You think she might not? It's possible. I wasn't sure whether that made me feel better or collapse. A few minutes passed before I spoke again. My grandmother trusted them. Jeremiah nodded. She did. She trusted them to protect my future. Yes. And they took it. His silence answered the question. I looked back down at the records. The numbers blurred together, withdrawal after withdrawal, year after year. Every page felt like another betrayal. Suddenly, I remembered something, a conversation from years earlier. I looked up immediately. The house! Jeremiah frowned. What about it? When my parents renovated the house, he remained quiet. That happened around the same time. Jeremiah's expression changed slightly. Go on. They said they received an unexpected investment payout. I remember. My stomach tightened again. That wasn't an investment payout, was it? Jeremiah didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was already sitting in front of me. Every memory suddenly looked different. Every financial miracle. Every convenient explanation. Every story that never quite made sense. Oh my God. Jeremiah slowly folded his hands together. You're starting to see it. They used my future. My voice cracked. They literally used my future. The pain surprised me. Not because money was gone. Money can be earned again. I proved that years ago. What hurt was the deception, the years of dishonesty. The knowledge that the people who were supposed to protect me had quietly chosen someone else. Chosen Connor. Chosen Nia. Chosen themselves. Anyone except me. I looked toward the hallway where Malik was sleeping. I would never do this to him. Jeremiah followed my gaze. I know. No matter what happened. I know. No matter how desperate I became. I know. Tears finally escaped despite my efforts to stop them. Then how could they do it to me? Jeremiah didn't answer because there was no answer capable of fixing what had happened. Eventually, I wiped my eyes and looked back at the documents. For the first time since opening the folder, my sadness began giving way to something else. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. Pure clarity. I finally understood why my parents were panicking. It wasn't just about the missing monthly transfers. It wasn't just about their lifestyle. They were terrified because the person they had lied to for years was finally learning the truth. Grandpa. Yes? If the trust money hadn't disappeared. He nodded slowly. You would have started your adult life very differently. I laughed bitterly. That's one way to say it. Jeremiah watched me carefully. What are you thinking? I looked down at the records one final time. I'm thinking that everything I believed about my family was wrong. The room fell silent. Then I slowly closed the folder and pushed it away. Grandpa. Yes? I held his gaze. Are you telling me my parents stole my future to save Connor? This time Jeremiah didn't answer immediately. His silence lasted several long seconds. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any answer possibly could. For a long time after asking the question, neither of us spoke. Jeremiah's silence had already given me the answer. He didn't need to say yes. He didn't need to explain. The documents had done that for him. My parents had spent years convincing me that life had simply been unfair. They told me opportunities disappeared. They told me sacrifices were necessary. They told me everyone struggled. Meanwhile, they had quietly taken money intended for my future and redirected it somewhere else. The betrayal felt almost impossible to process. But the longer I sat there, the more another realization began taking shape. This wasn't happening anymore. It had already happened. The money was gone. The lies had already been told. The damage had already been done. The only thing left to decide was what happened next. Jeremiah seemed to recognize the change in my expression. What are you thinking? He asked. I looked toward the closed folder. I'm thinking I've spent too much time reacting. Meaning? Every conversation we've had since the accident has been about what they did. Jeremiah nodded. And? I'm tired of talking about what they did. He leaned back slightly. What would you rather talk about? I met his eyes. What I'm going to do. For the first time all afternoon, a faint smile appeared on his face. Now you're asking the right question. I stood carefully and moved toward the kitchen counter. My legs still hurt, but not enough to stop me. Not anymore. Something inside me had changed. The little girl who spent her life begging for approval was exhausted. The woman standing in her place wanted answers. Tell me something honestly. Jeremiah folded his arms. Always. If I do nothing, what happens? He didn't hesitate. Your parents continue exactly as they have been. And Connor? Same answer. I nodded slowly. What if I cut off every dollar? Jeremiah thought for a moment. Then reality arrives very quickly. The statement lingered in the room. Reality arrives very quickly. I understood exactly what he meant. For years, financial support had protected everyone from consequences. It softened mistakes, delayed accountability, covered problems before they became visible. Remove that protection and everything changes. Do they know how much I know? I asked. Not yet. Good. Jeremiah studied me carefully. You don't sound surprised anymore. I'm not. And it was true. A strange calm had replaced the anger. Not forgiveness, not acceptance. Clarity. Every lie, every excuse, every suspicious reaction now fit together. My parents weren't panicking because of a missed payment. They were panicking because control was slipping away. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. Another message from my father. I opened it without hesitation. We need to resolve this immediately. I showed it to Jeremiah. He laughed softly. Interesting choice of words. Resolve. Exactly. I looked at the screen. Not apologize. No. Not explain. No. Resolve. Jeremiah nodded. Because he still thinks this is a financial problem. I looked down at the message again. For the first time, I realized something important. My father genuinely believed the money was the issue. He still didn't understand that the trust fund had changed everything. The accident had exposed abandonment. The records had exposed deception. The transfers were simply the symptom. The disease had existed for years. I want copies of everything. Jeremiah's expression brightened slightly. Already prepared. He reached into his briefcase and handed me a thick file. Every withdrawal, every trust document, every transfer record. Years of evidence neatly organized. I flipped through the pages slowly. The more I read, the more determined I became. Good? Good? Jeremiah asked. Very good. Why? I closed the folder. Because nobody gets to call me emotional when I have paperwork. He laughed. That's my granddaughter. The conversation paused when Malik began crying from the nursery. I immediately stood and walked toward his room. The moment I picked him up, he settled against my shoulder. His tiny hand wrapped around my finger. His breathing slowed. For a few moments, the rest of the world disappeared. No Connor, no missing trust fund, no manipulative parents, just me and my son. Then a thought hit me. I looked down at him. Nobody is ever doing this to you. Jeremiah appeared in the doorway. What? Nobody is ever taking from him the way they took from me. Jeremiah nodded quietly. I know. Nobody is ever making him earn love. I know. The conviction in my own voice surprised me. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking like a daughter. I was thinking like a parent. And suddenly my parents' decisions looked even worse. Much worse. I spent the next hour reviewing documents while Malik slept nearby. Patterns began emerging everywhere. Transfers, withdrawals, expenses. None of it looked accidental. The deeper I looked, the clearer one fact became. Connor's problems had influenced family decisions for years. Maybe not every decision, but enough of them. More than enough. Eventually, I closed the final folder. Okay. Jeremiah looked up. Okay? I'm done waiting. Meaning? I placed the paperwork neatly on the table. Meaning they spent years making decisions behind my back. That's true. Now it's my turn. A slow smile appeared on Jeremiah's face. What exactly are you planning? I walked back to the dining table and opened my laptop. Dozens of financial accounts appeared on the screen. Personal accounts, automated transfers, recurring payments, financial support systems that had operated quietly for years. Jeremiah immediately understood. Ah, exactly. You're sure? I thought about the hospital, the cruise ship, the trust fund, the lies, the voicemail messages asking about money instead of Malik. Then I thought about my son sleeping peacefully in the next room. I've never been more sure of anything. Jeremiah nodded once. Then do it properly. I looked at the screen. For years, I had been funding a version of reality that protected everyone except me. That reality was about to end. My finger moved toward the first recurring transfer, then the second, then the third. One by one, I began making decisions my parents never believed I would make. And somewhere hundreds of miles away, completely unaware of what was happening, My family was about to discover what life looked like without me carrying the weight of their choices. The following morning, I finished something my parents never expected me to do. I stopped being their safety net. Every recurring transfer connected to their lifestyle had been reviewed. Every automatic payment funded through my support had been identified. Every financial arrangement I personally controlled had been documented. I didn't make the decision out of anger. That was the part nobody would understand. Anger fades. Anger makes mistakes. This wasn't anger. It was clarity. For the first time in my life, I was looking at the situation without guilt. My parents had spent years teaching me that helping them was my responsibility. The accident shattered that illusion. The trust documents destroyed whatever remained of it. By noon, the first consequences began arriving. My phone rang repeatedly. I ignored every call. Then the messages started. Dad, call me immediately. Mom, there has to be some misunderstanding. Nia, what exactly did you do? I read every message and answered none of them. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, Jeremiah walked into the living room carrying another folder. By now, that sight had become familiar. Every folder seemed to contain a truth someone had tried to hide. More bad news? I asked. Jeremiah sat across from me. Depends on your perspective. That's never a good sign. A faint smile appeared on his face. Probably not. He opened the folder and slid several documents across the table. I immediately recognized the address printed at the top. My parents' house. Why are we looking at this? Jeremiah tapped the paperwork. Because your father lied about something else. I stared at him. Another thing? Several things, actually. I picked up the first document. The deeper I read, the more confused I became. Loan records, property filings, refinancing agreements, credit documents. I don't understand. Jeremiah leaned forward. Your parents have been telling everyone they own that house outright. They do, don't they? No. The answer came instantly. I looked back down at the paperwork. What are you talking about? They refinanced multiple times. My stomach tightened. For what? That's the interesting question. I continued reading. The numbers were enormous. Several refinancing agreements had been completed over the years. Large amounts of equity had been extracted from the property. Millions of dollars had moved through various accounts. Yet almost none of it appeared connected to improvements or investments. Where did the money go? I asked. Jeremiah folded his arms. Exactly. I looked at him. You don't know? Not completely. But you have a theory. He nodded. A strong one. The room fell silent. I already knew whose name was coming next. Connor. Every road eventually led back to Connor. How much? I asked quietly. Jeremiah pointed toward one of the pages. Start adding. I did. Then I checked the numbers again because I assumed I had made a mistake. I hadn't. The total was staggering. That's impossible. No. Jeremiah's voice remained calm. It's documented. My pulse quickened. They borrowed that much against the house? Yes. Why? To solve problems. Connor's problems? Jeremiah didn't answer directly. Let's just say your parents weren't making financial decisions for themselves. I looked toward the window. The implications were becoming impossible to ignore. My parents hadn't merely helped Connor. They had built their entire financial existence around protecting him. They drained trust funds, accepted my support, leveraged their home, and somehow, despite all of that, the problems still hadn't disappeared. Suddenly my phone rang again. My father. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Then again. Then again. On the fourth attempt I answered. What? The silence on the other end lasted only a second. What have you done? His voice sounded completely different. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the authority. Fear had finally entered the conversation. That's a broad question. Stop playing games. I'm not. The transfers stopped. Yes. The automatic payments stopped. Yes. Several accounts have been frozen. I sat upright. What accounts? My father immediately realized he had said too much. Nothing. Jeremiah's eyes narrowed from across the room. He noticed it too. Dad. Forget I said that. No. My voice hardened. What accounts? The silence stretched longer this time. Finally he answered. It's complicated. I laughed despite myself. There it is again. Zariah. Every single time someone gets close to the truth, everything suddenly becomes complicated. You don't understand what you're doing. Then explain it. My father lowered his voice. Some obligations exist. Boo. Silence. Dad, you need to restart the transfers. Why? Because if you don't, people get hurt. The statement immediately caught my attention. People get hurt. Not inconvenienced. Not embarrassed. Hurt. What people? I asked. Once again, he refused to answer. Jeremiah slowly shook his head. He was hearing exactly what I was hearing. Panic. Real panic. The kind that appears when consequences finally become unavoidable. Dad, please. The word surprised me. My father never said please. Restart the support. No. Silence. What? No. My voice remained calm. I'm done financing decisions I never agreed to. His breathing became heavier. You don't know what you're talking about. Then educate me. I can't. Actually, you can. The room became completely silent. Finally, my father spoke. Connor is trying to fix everything. Jeremiah laughed out loud. It was the first time I'd heard him laugh during one of these conversations. Fix what? I asked. The situation. Which situation? The financial situation. Be specific. Another long pause followed. Then my father made a mistake. A very large mistake. If the house becomes a problem, everything becomes a problem. Jeremiah immediately sat forward. I felt my pulse spike. What does that mean? I asked. Nothing. You just said it. Forget it. No. My grip tightened around the phone. What happens if the house becomes a problem? My father didn't answer. But he didn't need to. Because suddenly Jeremiah reached for the folder and opened it to a page I hadn't seen before. His eyes moved quickly across the document. Then he looked directly at me. The expression on his face told me everything. Grandpa? He slowly pointed toward a line near the bottom of the page. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. My stomach dropped. No way. Jeremiah nodded. My father was still on the line. What? He demanded. Neither of us answered. Because for the first time, we finally understood why my parents were so terrified. The house wasn't simply their home. It was the last thing holding an enormous financial disaster together. And if that structure collapsed, Connor wouldn't be the only person facing consequences. For several seconds after reading the document, I couldn't speak. My father's voice continued coming through the phone, demanding answers, but it sounded distant now. All of my attention was focused on the page in front of me. The numbers, the signatures, the legal language. Suddenly everything made sense. The refinancing, the missing money, the panic, the desperate phone calls. None of it had ever been about a missed monthly transfer. The transfer had simply exposed a problem that already existed. A very large problem. Zariah? My father demanded. What is going on? I slowly looked up at Jeremiah. How long have you known? Jeremiah remained calm. I suspected it several months ago. And now? Now I know. My father immediately interrupted. Know what? Neither of us answered. The silence seemed to make him even more nervous. Marcus, Jeremiah finally said. You should have told her the truth years ago. The line became quiet. Then my father's voice returned, lower than before. Stay out of this. I tried. Jeremiah closed the folder. You made that impossible. My father hung up. No warning. No goodbye. Just silence. I lowered the phone and stared at the dark screen. For the first time since the accident, I felt something stronger than betrayal. I felt anger. Real anger. Not the emotional kind that burns hot and disappears quickly. The cold kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that arrives when someone finally understands exactly what has been done to them. Jeremiah watched me carefully. You okay? I laughed once. No. Good. I looked at him. Good? Anger is useful when it's honest. I leaned back in my chair. What happens now? Jeremiah's answer came immediately. Now people start protecting themselves. Meaning? Meaning Connor. The name hung in the air between us. Connor. The center of every secret. The center of every missing dollar. The center of every decision my parents refused to explain. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my father. It was Nia. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. What? Her voice sounded shaky. Where are Mom and Dad? I have no idea. They left the house. Okay. They aren't answering their phones. I frowned. Why are you calling me? Silence. Then she spoke again. Something happened. My stomach tightened immediately. What happened? Connor got a call. From who? Another pause. I don't know. She was lying. I could hear it. Nia. I don't know exactly. Try again. Her breathing became uneven. People have been asking questions. Jeremiah immediately looked up. He was listening now. What people? I asked. I don't know. You keep saying that. Because it's true. I wasn't convinced. Not even slightly. For years, Nia had protected Connor the same way my parents did. She always knew more than she admitted. Questions about what? I asked. The silence that followed lasted nearly 10 seconds. Money. There it was, the same answer every time. Money. What money? Investments. My pulse quickened. Whose investments? Clients. The room became completely still. Jeremiah slowly folded his arms. How serious is it? I asked. I don't know. Nia. I'm serious. Her voice cracked. Connor hasn't told me everything. For the first time since the conversation began, I believed her. Not because she sounded honest, because she sounded scared. Truly scared. What did the caller want? I asked. Documents. Jeremiah and I exchanged a quick glance. What kind of documents? Financial records. My stomach dropped. Why? I don't know. Another lie. But a smaller one. The truth was already close enough to see. Somebody was looking into Connor's finances. Maybe a client, maybe an attorney, maybe several people. Whatever the reason, the pressure was increasing. Has Connor explained anything? I asked. He says everything is under control. Jeremiah laughed softly. Nia heard it. What's so funny? People only say everything is under control when nothing is under control. She didn't respond. Because she knew he was right. The conversation ended a few minutes later. The moment I hung up, Jeremiah stood and walked toward the window. It's starting. What is? The collapse. I stared at him. You sound certain. I am. Why? Jeremiah turned toward me. Because financial problems can be hidden. Okay. Legal problems can be delayed. Okay. But once other people start asking questions, everything changes. I knew exactly what he meant. Secrets survive in darkness. They rarely survive attention. The next 2 days proved him right. Calls continued arriving from my family. Some sounded angry, others sounded frightened. The tone changed almost hourly. Meanwhile, I focused on recovery and Malik. For the first time in years, I stopped trying to solve everyone else's problems. I spent my time healing, reading, caring for my son, sleeping when I needed sleep. The strange thing was that the more distance I created, the clearer everything became. I started noticing patterns I had ignored for years. Every family crisis somehow revolved around Connor. Every emergency involved money. Every request for help eventually landed in my lap. Yet somehow I was always treated like the least important person in the room. 3 days later, Jeremiah arrived carrying another stack of papers. His expression immediately told me something had happened. What now? I asked. He placed the documents on the table. More questions. From who? Several people. My stomach tightened. About Connor? He nodded. And? Jeremiah sat down slowly. The number is growing. How many? Enough. I knew that look. He wasn't ready to give a number. Not yet. This is getting serious, isn't it? Jeremiah looked directly at me. It's already serious. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. Connor. The first time he had ever called me directly. I stared at the screen. So did Jeremiah. Neither of us moved for several seconds. Then he nodded. Answer it. I accepted the call and lifted the phone to my ear. Connor's voice sounded completely different from the confident man I had known for years. There was no arrogance, no charm, no control, only fear. Real fear. Zariah. I remained silent. Please listen to me. My grip tightened around the phone. Why? Several seconds passed before he answered. Because things are worse than you think. And for the first time since this entire nightmare began, I realized Connor was finally running out of places to hide. Connor's voice sounded nothing like the man I had known for years. The confidence was gone. The polished charm was gone. Even the arrogance had disappeared. What remained was fear. Real fear. The kind people carry when they know events are moving beyond their control. Things are worse than you think, he repeated. I remained silent. Across the room, Jeremiah watched carefully. Zariah, are you there? Connor asked. I'm here. Then please listen. That depends. A long pause followed. On what? Whether you're finally ready to tell the truth. For several seconds, I heard nothing except his breathing. It's complicated. I almost laughed. After everything that had happened, I was tired of that phrase. Then we're done. Wait. His voice immediately rose. Please. The desperation caught my attention. Connor was not a man who begged. Talk. Another pause followed. People are making accusations. About what? Investments. Be specific. Client funds. Jeremiah slowly folded his arms. He had expected this. And? I asked. They're wrong. The answer came too quickly, too automatically. You sound very confident. Because I know what happened. Then explain it. Connor hesitated. I can't discuss details over the phone. Then why did you call? Silence. Finally, he answered. Because your parents aren't helping. That statement immediately grabbed my attention. What does that mean? They're panicking. For the first time, I believed him completely. Panic had practically become my parents' primary personality trait during the previous 2 weeks. And? They're making things worse. How? Connor exhaled heavily. They're talking to people. What people? Anyone who will listen. I leaned back in my chair. Sounds familiar. Connor ignored the comment. I need time. For what? To fix everything. There it was again. The same language. Fix everything. Solve the problem. Restore the transfers. Nobody ever talked about truth. Nobody ever talked about responsibility. Only damage control. Connor. What? Did my parents use my trust fund money to help you? The line instantly went silent. Jeremiah looked up. Even he seemed interested in the answer. 10 seconds passed. Then 15. Finally, Connor spoke. You should talk to your parents about that. I laughed once. That's not an answer. Because it isn't my decision to discuss. Which was an answer. A very revealing answer. Interesting. Zariah. You could have denied it. Silence. You didn't. More silence. That tells me everything I need to know. Connor's voice became quieter. I never asked them to do that. I immediately looked at Jeremiah. He raised an eyebrow. We both noticed the wording. Not I didn't receive the money. Not it never happened. Only that he never asked. But you accepted it, I said. Connor didn't respond. Didn't you? Another long pause followed. Finally, he answered. I was trying to survive. I closed my eyes. There it was. The closest thing to honesty I had heard from anyone in that family. So was I said quietly. What? I was trying to survive too. Connor remained silent. The difference is that nobody stole $1 million from you to help me. The call ended shortly afterward. Connor never admitted everything, but he admitted enough. The moment I lowered the phone, Jeremiah sighed. Well? Well, what? Now we know. I nodded slowly. Yeah. How do you feel? I thought about the question carefully. Surprisingly, I didn't feel angry anymore. Not the way I expected. The truth had replaced the anger. And the truth was simpler than I wanted it to be. My parents chose Connor. They chose him repeatedly. They chose him over my future. They chose him over honesty. They chose him over me. The next morning, reality finally arrived at my front door. Literally. I was feeding Malik breakfast when the doorbell rang. Jeremiah happened to be visiting again and opened the door before I could reach it. Seconds later, I heard raised voices. Then I heard my mother's voice. We need to talk to her. I walked into the living room and immediately froze. My parents stood near the entrance. Behind them stood Nia. All three looked exhausted. My father looked like he hadn't slept. My mother's eyes were red. Nia looked terrified. None of them had come to visit me during recovery. None of them had checked on Malik. Yet here they were now. "What do you want?" I asked. Nobody answered immediately. Finally, my mother spoke. "Can we sit down?" "Why?" "Because this is important." "More important than emergency surgery?" The question landed exactly where I intended. My mother looked away. "Please." I considered sending them away. Honestly, I wanted to, but another part of me wanted answers. Real answers. So I sat down. They followed. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then my father finally broke the silence. "Things have become difficult. I've noticed." He ignored the comment. "Connor is under pressure." "I've noticed that too." My father rubbed his forehead. "This isn't a joke. Neither was stealing my trust fund." The room instantly became silent. My mother closed her eyes. Nia stared at the floor. My father looked away. Nobody denied it. Nobody even attempted to deny it. That alone felt like a confession. "How much?" I asked. "What?" My father replied. "How much of my trust fund went to Connor?" The question hung in the air. Finally, my mother answered. "We were trying to help family." "That's not a number." "Zariah." "A number." Her shoulders dropped. "Several 100,000. The answer felt strangely calm now. Almost expected. "Why?" I asked. "Because we thought he could recover." My father nodded immediately. "He promised everything would be temporary." I laughed softly. "And you believed him." "He was family." There was that word again. Family. The same word they never remembered when I needed help. "No." I shook my head. "He was your favorite." Nobody argued. The silence became its own answer. Nia finally spoke for the first time. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I looked at her. How was it supposed to happen? Tears appeared in her eyes. "We thought he could fix everything." "And if he couldn't?" She didn't answer. "Then what?" I pressed. "Were you going to tell me?" More silence. "Were you?" Nia slowly lowered her head. That answer hurt more than words, because now I knew. They never planned to tell me. Not about the trust fund. Not about the money. Not about Connor. The truth only appeared because everything started collapsing. "Do you know what's funny?" I asked quietly. Nobody responded. For years, I thought something was wrong with me. My mother looked up. "What?" I thought I wasn't lovable enough. Tears began forming despite my efforts to stop them. "I thought if I worked harder, achieved more, earned more money, maybe you'd finally be proud of me." The room remained silent. Then I nearly died. I looked directly at my parents. "And you chose a cruise ship." Neither of them could meet my eyes. That was when I finally understood. My father swallowed hard. "Zariah." "No." I shook my head. "You don't get to explain anymore." The room became completely still. "You made your choices." My voice remained calm. "Now I get to make mine." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For the first time in my life, the power in the conversation belonged to me. And judging by the expressions on their faces, they finally understood that nothing was ever going back to the way it was before. After my parents left that afternoon, the house became quiet in a way it hadn't been for weeks. No phone calls, no excuses, no demands, no desperate attempts to control the story, just silence. I sat in the nursery holding Malik while he slept against my chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. For the first time since the accident, I wasn't thinking about Connor. I wasn't thinking about my parents. I wasn't thinking about missing money or broken trust. I was thinking about peace, real peace, the kind that arrives only after the truth finally stops hiding. Over the next several months, everything unfolded exactly the way Jeremiah predicted. Once questions started being asked, more questions followed. Once people started looking at records, more records appeared. Once the truth started surfacing, nobody could stop it. Connor spent months trying to repair the damage. At first, he promised everyone that the problems were temporary. Then he promised they were misunderstandings. Then he promised they would disappear. None of those promises survived reality. Clients wanted answers. Former supporters wanted answers. People who once trusted him wanted answers. Eventually, excuses stopped working. Nia remained with him longer than anyone expected. Part of me understood why. She had built her entire life around believing Connor was the smartest person in every room. Accepting the truth meant accepting that she had ignored warning signs for years. But reality has a way of winning arguments. One day at a time. One fact at a time. One consequence at a time. My parents suffered their own collapse. Not financial collapse. Something much deeper. The collapse of the image they spent decades protecting. Friends learned the truth. Family members learned the truth. People began asking uncomfortable questions. The same people who once praised their generosity suddenly wanted explanations. The same people who admired their perfect family suddenly saw the cracks. For years, my parents controlled every story. Now they couldn't control any of them. The strange thing was that I didn't celebrate. Months earlier, I probably would have. Months earlier, I wanted revenge. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to understand the damage they caused. But somewhere during my recovery, something changed. Revenge stopped being important. Healing became important. One afternoon, nearly 8 months after the accident, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But something told me it was time. Hello? For several seconds, she didn't speak. Then I heard her crying. Not dramatic crying, not manipulative crying, just quiet tears from someone who finally understood what she had lost. Hi, Mom. Her voice trembled. How is Malik? The question surprised me. Because for once, it sounded genuine. He's doing great. Can I see him sometime? I looked through the living room window at my son playing in the backyard. He was laughing as Jeremiah helped him chase bubbles through the grass. Maybe? My mother began crying harder. I know I don't deserve that answer. I didn't respond, because she was right. I made mistakes. Yes. More than mistakes. Yes. Another silence followed. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air between us, the apology I spent my entire life waiting to hear. Yet when it finally arrived, it didn't feel the way I expected. It didn't erase anything. It didn't repair anything. It was simply the truth. And sometimes the truth is all an apology can offer. I know, I said quietly. She cried for a few more moments before ending the call. We never became close again. Neither did my father and I. Some damage heals. Some damage becomes a scar. Our relationship became a scar. Not an open wound, not a war, just a reminder of what happened. Nia eventually reached out too. Unlike my parents, she didn't ask for forgiveness immediately. She asked for honesty. That was a better place to start. We talked. Slowly, carefully, sometimes painfully. For the first time in our lives, we spoke without pretending. We spoke as two people trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Recovery wasn't quick, but it was real. Connor disappeared from family conversations almost entirely. His name stopped appearing at holidays, stopped appearing during phone calls, stopped appearing in excuses. The center of the family's universe was finally gone, and without him there, everyone was forced to face themselves. As for me, life moved forward. My leg healed, my strength returned, my company continued growing. More importantly, I stopped carrying responsibilities that never belonged to me. I stopped apologizing for other people's choices. I stopped financing other people's mistakes. I stopped sacrificing my peace to earn love. The greatest surprise came one spring afternoon nearly a year after the accident. Malik and I were sitting on a blanket near a lake while Jeremiah watched from a nearby bench. My son was laughing as he threw pieces of bread toward a group of ducks. The sun reflected across the water. Everything felt calm, simple, safe. Mommy. I looked down. Yeah, buddy? He pointed toward Jeremiah. Grandpa funny. I laughed. Yes, he is. Jeremiah pretended to look offended. Malik laughed even harder. Watching the two of them together filled me with something I had never truly experienced growing up. Security. Not financial security. Emotional security. The certainty that someone would show up when it mattered. The certainty that love didn't have to be earned. The certainty that family could be chosen through actions instead of words. I thought back to the day of the accident, the hospital, the fear, the phone call, the cruise ship. At the time, I believed it was the worst day of my life. In many ways it was. But it was also the day everything became clear. The day illusions died. The day truth arrived. The day I stopped chasing people who had already made their choice. If my parents had come to that hospital, I might never have discovered any of it. The trust fund, the lies, the dependence, the secrets. Their abandonment exposed everything. And strange as it sounds, that became a gift. A painful gift. But a gift nonetheless. Jeremiah eventually walked over and sat beside us. "You look happy." I smiled. "I am. Good." We watched Malik play for a while. Then Jeremiah asked the question he had never asked before. "Do you regret anything?" I thought carefully before answering. I thought about the money, the betrayal, the lies, the years I spent trying to earn love. Then I looked at my son. "No," Jeremiah smiled. "Not even the support you gave them?" "No." "Why?" I watched Malik laugh as he chased another duck toward the water. "Because now I know the difference between helping people and carrying them." Jeremiah nodded slowly. "That's an expensive lesson. The most expensive lesson of my life." We both laughed. Then the conversation ended, and we simply enjoyed the afternoon. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see back then. Family isn't defined by blood. Blood explains where you come from. It doesn't determine who stands beside you when everything falls apart. The people who matter are the people who show up, the people who stay, the people who choose you when choosing you costs something. On the worst day of my life, my parents chose a cruise ship. My grandfather chose me, and that decision changed the rest of my life forever.